My name is Canucci Carinella. I am the executive director, and I just wanted to recognize the staff and board members who worked really hard to make this night happen, as well as the candidates. Obviously, been working real hard to get this far in the race. I'm excited to share this evening with you, and let's get started. As we start every event at the Wenatchee River Institute, we start with the land acknowledgement. So I'm going to read that to start us off, and then we'll get going with the rules of the evening, and then we will introduce our candidates and bring the questions to them. So here we go. This land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shin-Pei-Squaw people. We're spreading the message they wish to be spread to the public. The land the Wenatchee River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shin-Pei-Squaw, the Pisclosa Wenatchee people. The Shin-Pei-Squaw means the people in between. They had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and in surrounding areas. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Range through what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan Valleys. The culture and economy of the Shin-Pei-Squaw people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries and basket-making materials and medicines. The Shin-Pei-Squaw are named in the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shin-Pei-Squaw now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their land here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shin-Pei-Squaw people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they are connected to. Their traditional language is Inham Sheen, which is an interior Salish dialect. And we'd like to welcome you all here tonight by saying hello in their language, Tilush. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous people of this place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. Thank you. So why are we doing this at Wenatchee River Institute? We're doing this to provide a point of connection between our members and the future leader of this town. We're leaning into our values of being welcoming, respectful, and relevant, and a place of connection for our community. We hope by the end of this evening, we all leave with a little more being a little more informed about the differences of approach and leadership and opinion of each of the candidates, so we'll all feel empowered to make an informed choice when we vote. So here are the ideas of what we're doing tonight. We've worked with both campaigns to set the stage to make this a meaningful and educational evening. We collected questions from our community for a couple of weeks around 9 themes that are important to WRI and to the community of Leavenworth. I'll be asking each candidate the same question. There'll be no audience questions live tonight. Each candidate will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to answer. Wenatchee River Institute board member Mandy Maxwell is our timekeeper tonight. She's sitting there. And she'll let our candidates know when there's 30 seconds left on the little whiteboard. There'll be about 9 questions, and we plan to have a few minutes at the end of the evening for wrap up for each candidate to have some final statements. We plan to end the evening at 7:15, the formal part of the evening. Then there'll be mingling and meet and greet the candidates if you'd like for 15 minutes before we close the Red Barn at 7:30 tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that this is the first time we're doing this, and we're a learning organization. We're trying to do this as well as we can for everyone. And we're trying to build community and build a place for the community to engage with each other. We want everyone to leave all our events with the next step, knowing what actions to take. And in this case, it's obvious. Please vote. Voting is our right and responsibility for all of us. Now I'll introduce the candidates. Rich Brinkman. Come sit. He is currently a professor of sociology at Wenatchee Valley College. He previously served as Leavenworth City Administrator for 6 years, receiving the City Administrator of the Year Award in 2006 for implementing a city council budget planning process. He also served on the Leavenworth City Council from 2016 to 2017 as a temporary replacement for Michael Mulholland. You can read more about his experience and priorities at brinkmanformayor.com. Carl Florea, Carl, please come sit. Originally came to Leavenworth in 1985 and served as a pastor of Faith Lutheran Church, which he did for 7 years. In that time, he turned once a week community covered food bank into a broader social service agency known as Upper Valley Mend, where he served as director from 98 to 2007. He's also served on the Cascade School Board from 87 to 91, the Leavenworth Planning Commission from 96 to 98, co-chaired the Washington Food Coalition, which was a statewide network of emergency food banks and feeding programs from 97 to 98, served on the Leavenworth City Council from 98 to 2003, and again from 2005 until 2007. He also served on the Housing Authority of Chelan County in the city of Wenatchee as the chair in 2001 and 2, and as a member of the board of the Upper Valley Connections in 2014 to 2019. Those are our candidates. I am going to sit down right over there, and we're going to get started. Hi guys. Hey, can you hear me okay? All right. You ready? Ready? Okay, here we go. First question. We're going to start with Rich. What's the mayor's job? What's unique about the mayor's role that motivates you to run for this office?
Okay, well, thank you, Kanuchi. Is the mic on for the Zoom people? Okay, thank you. We have, there are various forms of government, two in particular. Leavenworth has a strong mayor form of government. And so the mayor is really responsible for providing the direction and policy recommendations for the city council, which ultimately makes the policy decisions. I was city administrator, as Kanuchi mentioned here, for several years. In fact, when I left to go to Wenatchee Valley College, which was my dream job, it took 14 years to finally get it. I was actually brought back by the city of Leavenworth to serve as city administrator and also served on the city council. So I know the city very well. And we, in a strong mayor form of government, need a very strong mayor who provides excellent first-rate leadership. And I think you always lead by example. So the mayor is in a critically important position alongside a very productive and competent city administrator. And I have the tools and motivation necessary to lead Leavenworth into the future. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to hope that in this situation, I get to sit. Those of you who came to our last one know that I sat when I shouldn't have sat, but I'm hoping this time I can sit and you can all see and hear me. So the role of mayor, the mayor is basically like, I would say, similar to what Rich has said, but it's like, I would compare it to a CEO, the head of the organization, the one who is the one in charge, if you would. And I would also say that it is called a strong mayor because there's a form of government where the council basically chooses the administrator and the council chooses a mayor, and they're just one of many on the council. A strong mayor, again, is the one who sets the administrative side. If you think of legislation, would be the council. They do pass policy, they do pass budget, but the one to carry it out it's the mayor's job to get the work done. and to influence. Now, we do have an administrator, and quite frankly, the administrator is the full-time, the professional, the one that you choose because they've got the training and the knowledge and all of that. But the mayor sets the tone and sets the guideline and does, again, set by example. Up until I was elected, many of the mayors that have been here have chosen to make that a very part-time position. The administrator basically ran everything, and they were more ceremonial and came in on occasion to sign the things that needed to be signed and that. That's not my style. That's not who I am. I wanted to get more engaged and more involved, so it's been more of a full-time, not a full-time pay, believe me, but a full-time job for me. Because I have a lot of passion for what I want to see get accomplished. And so it takes energy and it takes that leadership. And so that's why I ran for mayor. I actually chose that position because I thought it was the best place where I could influence and get some things done that I'm passionate about. So.
Thank you. This next question has a theme of wildlife. We'll start with Carl this time. There is a continued pressure for growth in our town, specifically for housing developments, which impacts our green spaces, wetlands, and wildlife corridors. How will you prioritize the protection of wildlife habitat within these city limits and within our community?
And that's as you know, we are living in the midst of wildlife, and whether we like it or not, there are neighbors, I would hope there are friends. I would hope we would have that approach and way. But the reality is too that we are a city, and a city is required to plan for growth and and primarily that's along the lines of housing and that. So that we have an urban growth area that says we need to plan for our population. One of the things we haven't done, quite frankly, and one of the reasons I ran is because we grew, but we didn't grow smartly, if you would. We didn't grow our workforce housing, so we have very little workforce housing. So we have to, we're required to plan and to accommodate our workforce. We haven't done it. We just basically ignored. There's laws in place that say you will plan for your workforce and you will grow all types of housing so that you can house them. We haven't done that. So we do have to address housing, and we do have to plan for growth. And it's the type of growth that we need to plan for, and that's growth for our workforce. Right now, we're almost 40% of our housing is second homes. That's not a sustainable community. So unfortunately, that's going to impact more of the wildlife than around, but there's other things that we need to do to care for the areas that are wild areas. And that's a whole nother topic that I'd use with working with our partners. We're to not go overboard on our usage of our wild lands and keep it for the future and plan and respect it and work to minimize our impact on it. And I think we've got a long ways to go in that area too. So.
No, that's okay. And I hope you don't mind if I stand. Okay. I first just want to share real briefly, and some of you certainly know this, that a few years ago, I hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail, Mexico to Canada. And one of the most amazing things about that experience was becoming one with nature. In fact, I felt such a strong connection with nature that on trail, as long as I didn't have to break stride, I would touch every tree along the way and connect with it, right? So I have an extremely deep appreciation for nature. And I'd like to share much more about that, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on a little bit and just say that everybody who knows me or whoever has worked with me knows that I am a consensus builder. So if there are any questions posed to me and people want an immediate definitive answer, it's not that easy as what occurred in the last candidate forum, right? Where we were posed with yes or no questions, and it's just a lot more complicated than that. Okay, so approaching this issue, I would definitely work with the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife and try and organize a strategy to not only manage thoughtful growth for our city, but to maintain our nature and green spaces and wildlife. I think it's very important. We live in a very unique area that is incredibly beautiful, arguably one of the most beautiful in the entire country. Okay, and we definitely need to preserve that as much as we can while managing thoughtful growth. Thank you.
Okay, for you, Rich. Well, for both of you, but we'll start with you. What can be done about second home ownership in the community? Lots of homes sit empty all year while lots of people struggle to find affordable housing. Is there any recourse for discouraging second home ownership and encouraging long-term rentals?
Yeah, well, this is a tough issue. So let me just approach it in a couple of different ways. When I was on city council, I led the charge with fellow council member Sharon Waters, who's here tonight, to prohibit overnight rentals in our city. You know, so that was one step that we certainly could take. With regard to, you know, people having second homes, if people want, this is the troubling part of it. If people want to come and invest and buy property in Leavenworth, you know, how do we say, no, you can't do that? Okay, but there may be possibilities whereby if it's a second home, that there is some kind of tax that they would have to pay for having a second home in Leavenworth that sits vacant for the majority of the year. Now, I don't know if that's completely feasible, but it's certainly something that I would like to pursue. I agree with Carl. It's not a sustainable community when 40% of our housing is not lived in for the majority of the year. So this is something that we need to talk about and discuss and figure out solutions to. And I think by imposing some kind of, not necessarily penalty, but some kind of way of having these people that only live here for a very short time during the year contribute to the Leavenworth community is something that would be a priority. Thank you.
Nope, I got it. And yeah, about every angle you can imagine, I've worked at and tried around the issue of housing and increasing. And one of those is looking at those second homes and saying, can we tax those? Can we place some kind of fee on their being empty? Unfortunately, in Washington State, everything has to be taxed at their value, and you can't go above, you can't add a tax, you can't add a surcharge. The only way we could get that done, and believe me, I've started those conversations, is we're going to need, as a people, to decide. It's all over the state that this is a problem. We need, as a people, to change our constitution that would allow us, because many states can do this. And believe me, I've even approached and said, well, can we not do a property tax, you know, increase, but could we say ask for a fee in lieu of usage that would help us replace those homes, you know, by charging an annual fee? And again, what I was told is that would still be fought as a property tax that would go against the Constitution, and you would be taken to court. You may win, but the people that have the deep pockets would definitely, you know, challenge that as a tax. So I agree, it's a huge issue, and I wish there was, again, an easy answer. Right now in Washington State, there isn't. The only way we can do it, we can't keep them from coming and buying those. The only way we can do it is get a funding stream of our own and buy some of the land and the houses ourselves and say, these are ours. We're taking them off the market. We've got to protect it by getting them off the market. And that's what I've been proposing. That's what I've been working on, is getting us a funding stream so that we can take back control of our town and make sure we've got some housing for our workforce.
Carl, this next one starts with you. Has to do with climate change and fire. Leavenworth is situated in an area with high risk of wildfire coming through town. We are surrounded by dense forests and have limited escape routes, and bigger, hotter fires are becoming increasingly common. What steps are we taking to protect our community, and what policies would you support?
Yeah, you know, this is, again, so many of the things that are problems in our area are problems that are bigger than Leavenworth, and we've got to cooperate with many other agencies and realities that are out there. As you know, Leavenworth itself doesn't have its own fire department even. We're Fire District 3, and we work with them. They are our, you know, fire folks. They're the experts in dealing with fire. We work with the county in their emergency management. I got to participate. You know, the good news and the bad news is we are the #1, you know, risk of fire in the state, in Leavenworth and around Leavenworth. The flip side of that, or the good news, is we know it. And believe me, I was just part of a group that had the PUD, all the fire districts in our area in the county emergency management, WSDOT, State Patrol, all of them were at a simulated exercise down in Wenatchee. And there was literally almost 100 people in a room, all of them representing federal, state, local agencies. So that's the good news is, folks, people are aware and they're preparing and they're doing that. We are, our Forest Service has gotten a bunch of dollars through that infrastructure, and they're pouring them into our area to thin and to do some fire burns. So we're doing that piece. What Leavenworth is doing, and what all you can do, is make sure, if you haven't done it yet, you contact the fire district and say, come and give me an audit of my place and tell me what I can do. Because again, experts will tell you the #1 thing isn't what your government's going to do, it's what you're going to do to save your own place and to make it, you know, fire resistant. We are also, I just signed a letter as part of, again, an ongoing grant that would come from the state that would help us to deal with fire on private lands around our area and things. So again, and we were the first in the county to pass the wildland urban interface building code. So all of our new buildings will have to be constructed to be fire, you know, resistant. And so again, it's, you know, there's no guarantees, but we keep taking the steps to do what we can do and acknowledge that we are in a dangerous place, fire-wise.
Well, I've given several speeches over the last decade or so on climate change, and I always conclude every speech with ignoring the problem is not cutting it anymore. You know, we've got a real problem with climate change, and so much of it is because of big money in our politics that is influencing policy that prevents our country, our government, from taking some significant action here. And one thing that really scares me is that if the city is going to continue to work toward higher and higher density with really bottlenecks at both ends of town, how do we evacuate people in that kind of emergency? I mean, we all saw what happened recently in Hawaii, and that is of extreme concern to me. So I think that's a major issue. What I would like to really see, and I know there have been some efforts to do this, and I appreciate, you know, that folks can call the fire district and get an audit on their property, but I think we need to really ramp up the education process so that people really understand what they need to do to keep their property, to keep their neighborhoods, to keep our city safe.
Next question, wildlife theme. Rich, we should be taking more precautions as a city to protect both the bears and the human residents. Do you have a plan to make Leavenworth more bear safe? How would you implement a citywide bear-proof garbage system?
Okay, well. Okay. I thought we did wildlife. Okay. But, you know, I remember when I was city administrator and I had one of the utility crew come into my office and say, Rich, we've got tourists down in Chapman Park, a sow and 2 cubs up in a tree, and they're going up to the tree to take pictures while the sow is snapping at them. And it took the utility crew to intervene and get these folks out of potential harm's way. I had 4 bear encounters on the PCT. They were all very gentlemanly. One night, no, they were. One night I had a sow and 2 cubs in trees above my tent. That was an interesting evening, but they never came in front of the tent or threatened me in any way. And I was very grateful for that. But it is an issue, right? We've got bears that come into our neighborhoods, and if garbage is not secured, there can be real potential issues there. And when you're out in the wilderness, they don't want anything to do with you. Okay, I mean, they don't. But when they become habituated into a city environment and raiding garbage cans, that's a completely different story. So I do think it is something that we do need to explore. There's always the cost issue, right? Do you replace all the garbage containers in the residential areas and downtown businesses with bear-proof containers? We can think about that, right? We can maybe try and plan for that. But again, I think education is the key thing here, because people don't want bears prowling around their property and their yard and potentially affecting their kids and so forth. And so I think that the big initial push, at least, needs to be an education campaign on how to keep your property bear-proof as much as possible.
So we have started the program and process to become a bear-wise community, and the first one in the state that have taken an initiative. We've gotten our first 40 bear resistant, we never say proof because nothing is proof, but bear resistant cans that we have then given about half of them to the school district. And then we're putting them in places of highest need, if you would, where we've had encounters along, basically along Blackbird Island areas and around there. We've made those available. The makers of those are interested in working with us to actually retool their machines to be able to make our 300-gallon downtown totes, if you would. Also adapt those to be able to make those that would be able to be bear resistant and go that route. We've talked about, and eventually I think what we're going to see is a requirement that people either wait and put their garbage cans out the morning of the garbage coming, or they're protected in a garage or in a container place that bears can't get at them until that time. Or they would be waste management. You can rent one now that's a bear resistant. It just adds to the cost, right? So you would have that option of, if you don't have a place or don't want to take your stuff in, to be able to, then you could rent a bear resistant. But we are going the direction of, again, recognizing we do live in bear country, and we are, and we don't want to encourage that, encourage their presence. Because right now, about 99% of the time, that bear, if it causes problems, will be killed. They're not relocating them anymore. Very, very rarely. It's too expensive and it doesn't work. They come back. They've taken them hundreds of miles away and watched them come back. So that's not an option anymore. we had somebody come up to the front desk at City Hall the other day and was saying how the place he was staying, they didn't take care of their garbage and it got, tipped over and the bears came and he said that they said it's almost a daily occurrence. And we took the adder and said, we'll get him a resistant can. But he says he wanted to complain. And then when he said, well, what'll happen to that bear is it would get euthanized. And he goes, what? He took out his wallet and he says, here, put this in your bear resistant fund. He felt bad that he was ratting on a bear that was just being a bear, right? So anyway, we are a part of nature. We are living in their world as much as they're living in ours. And we just have to acknowledge that and find ways to be together as well as we can. And we're well on our way to doing that with bears. There's other things, but.
Okay, Carl, this is for you. Given that our parking demands primarily come from tourists during weekends, how do we balance having enough parking for those tourists as well as residents and local employees?
Yeah, parking, boy, yeah, talk about a wild one. Well, we just have completed actually a second parking study. We did the first one. It said you need to pay for parking, you need to do this, so that people will move their vehicles around if they're downtown on the street. If there's parking meters with a limit, you'll get more flow and you'll get more space. It'll be better usage of the space. In that first parking study, 80% of our parking downtown was actually taken by employees, which meant all of the visitors that we say we're trying to have parking for, we really didn't. So by putting in the system that we currently have, which is still being tweaked a lot, by the way, but we just had another parking study done. And since we've taken the parking out of the downtown because it's closed off to parking now, we've taken some units out. So they're looking at what would it take to build a garage, and we're looking at where that would be and how that would be, funded. And again, a way to get us enough close to the downtown, enough that could be used and would hopefully be able to better supply for our employees as well. So, all of that. Paid parking, nobody likes it, but guess what? That's the only way we're going to get enough parking is by charging for it and then using it wisely and having a way that we can, locals can, there could be a pass system or some way that locals could be able to use it for occasions when they want to be downtown. But all of that is still, we're in the infant stage, but we're going to be still tweaking that, and still you'll see a lot of things happening around parking. And neighborhoods, by the way, can opt into a system where they can limit on-street parking in their neighborhoods, except for they can get passes that will exempt their cars. We have a system that can identify the cars by their licenses. And so they could, get out of that for them, but require any visitors that come into the residential would have a 2-hour limit. And that's available to people right now. And not a lot of people know about it, but we keep getting the word out.
Well, I think we all know that parking has been a major issue in Leavenworth for decades. There's no question about that. And again, want to go back to, everyone who knows me or who has worked with me knows that I am a consensus builder. If we're going to close off Front Street, when I'm downtown talking to business owners, what they tell me, and they're right, is that each one of those parking spaces that's going unused means dollars for our local merchants. And we're at a time now where we have downtown business owners who are actually struggling. Hey, and this historically, right, since the Leavenworth transformation in Miracle Town, really is unheard of. We have a local developer who is interested in a new development that would provide 350 additional parking spaces that would be available to the public. And I think that is a proposal that we really need to look very hard at and consider. Another thing that comes to mind is that if we're going to close Front Street between Highway 2 and 9th, then let's make sure that we do it right. Okay, that we do it right, that we make it a real European plaza style area. And what if, since the majority of, our traffic is on weekends, except for, right, the Oktoberfest and the Christmas lighting and so forth, what if we considered opening up Front Street Monday through Thursday? Because when I'm out knocking on doors, a lot of the local residents, especially elderly ones, are telling me that they can't go downtown because there's nowhere for them to park. So I'm not saying that I'm 100% for this, but I think it's worthy of consideration. What if we made it just a one-way, right, during Monday through Thursday, and then on the weekends, we close it off again, but we do it right, okay? We don't have these orange barriers that frankly don't look very good. Front Street is the welcome mat for our visitors, and it's crumbling. It does not look very good. And it's one thing to bring people to Leavenworth. It's quite another to bring people back. And that's a major concern I have for our city's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich, this one comes back to you. We have many restaurants in town, which inevitably creates a lot of food waste. How would you support a citywide initiative for restaurants and homes to keep food from entering the landfill?
Yeah, tough. That's a tough question. Again, I think you start with a major education campaign. One thing we're doing at the college, and the college is really impressive. We've got a sustainability committee that I served on for a few years, and we were just on the verge of completely eliminating all plastic bottles on the Wenatchee Valley College campus. Then COVID hit, and it kind of went away. But one thing the sustainability committee at the college is doing right now is a real focus on composting. Okay, and this would be something that I would really like to see the city implement, but it all has to start with a very strong education campaign, getting the restaurants and businesses to buy into it because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna start off by just saying, because we kind of got Rich kind of got off of the parking thing when he goes to the downtown thing. Those orange barriers, they'll be gone next year. We do have a plan to make that a plaza, and our downtown businesses voted by 90% that not to keep it open or open it back up. So we're listening to them as well in doing this. But we are redesigning right now. We're in the process working with the businesses and the downtown steering committee to redesign and invest in that downtown. So you'll see big changes coming. As far as the composting, we just got over a $300,000 grant to work with Winton Manufacturing that does composting and Waste Loop in town to expand it to the business community. So we are well underway. It is a huge thing of mine to be, again, responsible. We should be the greenest tourist town in the state, and we can become that, and we are on our way to doing that. So with that grant, we'll get more restaurants on board. Again, that's going to help take care of some of the beer problem too, right? If you are composting a lot of that, that would be an attractant. So it's well underway. We're working with Winton Manufacturing. We'll be doing the pickup. So because they've got the equipment, they're set up to do that. it's just in its infancy again. We just signed the paperwork on the grants and doing that, but we take that seriously. It's all part of being wise in our usage of our resources, and again, I don't know if you've done this yet, but I had the best garden I've had in years, and it's because I went and compost and put it on my garden this year. So yeah, and as a member that uses it, you get 10% off. So sign up if you haven't individually, and we will get our businesses on board.
Great. This one comes back to you, Carl. Do you think the city of Leavenworth should own housing which you can reserve for local employees? Or would you consider a solution such as rent subsidy vouchers for local employees?
I would consider anything for local workforce housing. I don't see the city owning housing. I see the city, though, getting a funding stream that we could put towards housing and workforce. I would see Upper Valley Mend. I'd see working with the Housing Authority. I would see working with others that would be, but the thing that it's got to be is permanently set aside and permanently affordable. There's, you know, the Housing Authority just rebought Bavarian Village apartments because they were in threat of losing their affordability. They were set aside and had to keep them affordable for, I don't know, there's a period, 40 years or something, and then they could go to market, but they first had to offer them to a nonprofit or somebody who would keep them affordable, and the Housing Authority went and purchased. Now they're renovating those. But whatever we do will have to be permanently taken out of the market, held by a nonprofit or by somebody that will keep them. And in order to do that, we need a funding stream. And I've been working with the legislature to allow us to put in a hotel motel tax for workforce housing that would use our guests to ask them to help us to keep our community whole. 2 cents on the dollar would get us between $1.5 million and $2 million every year that we could grab land, grab housing, subsidize housing, and say, this is ours. You can have the others. This is ours.
Well, I first must say that if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I would be pursuing any affordable housing initiative. In fact, when Aldea Village was being constructed, I was the city official who was able to secure several $100,000 in grant funds to complete the utility connection to that development. Okay, so please don't think for a moment that I'm not for affordable or workforce housing. I wish my house was more affordable, to be quite frank with you. But I bought my house and I'm very happy with it. But my mortgage payment each month is very high. And I'm okay with that because it was really my last chance to live permanently in the city that I love. And that's Leavenworth. I've been here since 2005. You know, the one thing that, you know, whether we like it or not, that we have to consider with affordable and workforce housing is that there are market forces that are outside of our control. Okay, and so we need to try and work through that and pursue whatever affordable and workforce housing opportunities may be out there for the city to pursue. And I would certainly be doing that.
Okay, Rich, this one's back to you. As we see more impacts from climate change, such as increased droughts, precipitation patterns changing, what policies do you support that will directly address these concerns? For example, would you put limitations on the amount of water people use, especially to water their lawns in our city?
Yeah, well, there are a number of things that could be considered, that one being included. But one thing I really want to point out here, because we did talk a little bit about climate earlier, right? And again, I've spoken multiple times on the issue. And, you know, it's been ignoring the problem for way too long, right? And now we've got these more and more significant storms that are happening all across the world, wildfires that are hotter and more severe all across the world. One thing that I really want to point out here, and I wasn't sure if there was going to be a question about our natural resources, so I'm just going to touch on it right now. And I would encourage you all to look up the experience of Freiburg, Maine. Okay, there was a documentary made. The documentary is called Tapped. I do show this film in my sociology classes at Wenatchee Valley College. But Nestle, right, big multinational corporation, came into Freiburg, Maine, and took advantage of very lax regulations and has been taking out Freiburg, Maine's groundwater for years. And the city of Freiburg, Maine tried to stand up to Nestle and fight against them taking their groundwater away from them. And very unfortunately, the court system ruled in Nestle's favor. And with our natural resources here, given the Icicle River, the Wenatchee River, the wells that we have to augment our domestic water supply, I fear that a major corporation is going to come to Leavenworth and do the same thing that happened to the poor people of Freiburg, Maine. And it's not just Freiburg, Maine, it's happened elsewhere as well. And it's something we really need to have on our radar.
So just in the terms of water, let me just say that right now we do have a major source of water on surface water plant out on the Icicle. With the climate change, we know what's going to happen is there's going to be less and less water that's going to be going down the Icicle. And we want to make sure we keep as much as possible for wildlife and fish and keep it, again, in its natural state. So in the past, Leavenworth has always said, no, that's sacrosanct. We're going to always have that water, surface water treatment plant. We're always going to use Icicle water. In my administration, what we did is ask and got a $500,000 grant to look at not just having subsidized wells that will augment our surface water, but that we go completely to a well system. It's the same aquifer. You're still using water out of the Wenatchee and the Icicle, but guess what? There's no fish in that water. There's no wildlife needing to use that water. It could be. And so we're involved right now in a $500,000 study to drill some wells to see if we can go completely to a well system and get out of the Icicle with our surface water treatment plant and leave more of it in there for the fish and for the wildlife as is in response to climate change. We also have got our new smart meters, and we're now going to be doing a study on how to maximize their usage. Smart meters take instantaneous readings at all times, and you can find out what water you're using through those meters at all times and any times. What it allows you to do is set different pricing for different times of day, for instance. And also we will start charging for every gallon used instead of giving away 7,500, or it used to be 15,000 with a base rate. Now it'll be much, much smaller, but usage, and it's called conservation, folks. It's called you pay for what you use from the first gallon to whatever. And that's how you're going to get people to watch what they use. Also, we'll have conservation on making programs trying to encourage xeriscaping, if you know, less water consumption in your landscaping, and those programs that we can develop that can encourage that, incentivize that. So those are the directions we're going to have to go, folks. That's the reality. We always thought water, we'll always have as much water as we need. When I came here in '85, we weren't even metering. And the streets were rivers because people would just leave them on all the time, right? Those days are far gone, folks, and it's the next oil is our water, and we've got to treat it like that.
Back to you, Carl. Is there another community that another small town tourist community that you might point to as a vision for the future of Leavenworth?
I can point to so many that we don't want to become. We are so beautiful, as everybody knows. I'm amazed. I can't believe I live here. I spent $39,000 for my home in '85. I couldn't be here today. Young families having struggles. I want it to be where, again, I want to interrupt what we're on. I saw that we were on this pathway like a lot of beautiful mountain towns. Where do they go? They go to lose a community of diversity and inclusion. And they become resorts and retirement and second homes for the jet setters and all of that. Lake Tahoe, somebody I know down there says now it's the billionaires forcing out the millionaires, you know, because when you have beauty and you have dollars, those two, guess who gets them? Well, I want us to interrupt that cycle that I've seen mountain town after mountain town go. We can still do it if we can get, but it's going to take dollars. I mean, that's the only way I know in America, we're capitalist society, you got to bring dollars to the table. It's the only way that I can say these are ours, is if I can bring some dollars to the table and say, no, you can't have this. And that's how we're going to interrupt this track that we've been on. 1 year during COVID, 1 year, we saw a 25% increase in the housing prices in our town. Is that sustainable, folks? I don't think so. I'm rich if I ever want to sell. I don't want to sell. But that's the thing, is we need to allow people of all incomes to be able to still work and live here if we're going to keep a community with schools, with hospitals, all of that. So I don't see any that I've seen that have fixed it. So I want to be the first.
Well, I am rich too, but in name and character only. I noticed that. Leavenworth is unique, and yeah, what's happened to many small towns like Leavenworth and various parts of the country is, you know, not a direction that we need to or want to necessarily follow. I do think it's worth taking some time, though, to see how these communities have tried to address their problems, whether successful or not. Again, you know, the mayor said it takes dollars. Yeah, okay. But one way that we can continue to raise dollars for important causes like this is to make sure, okay, as beautiful as our area is, okay, and don't get me wrong, I already mentioned we live in one of the most beautiful areas in the entire world, okay, but it's not just the environment we live in, it's the Bavarian theme that made us Miracle Town, okay, and so the more we rely on tourism, okay, folks, whether we like it or not, we are a tourism economy, and we have to make sure, okay, that remains very healthy. And as I mentioned previously, it's one thing to bring people to Leavenworth to visit. It's quite another to bring people back. And again, that is a major concern that I have for our city's future, because if we cut off or diminish that important revenue stream and source of pride, we could be in trouble. And so I would hope you support me in that endeavor.
Another question for you. Our town is geographically small, limited population, but the impact of the decisions of the city affects a greater geographic area, the urban growth boundary. How do you deal with that paradox?
Well, my focus first and foremost would always be within the city limits of Leavenworth. We are required to plan outside of that, of course. Okay, but really, the focus should be on the Leavenworth citizens, first and foremost. So while we're planning, right, for future growth, and again, I think we really need to manage thoughtful growth into the future. Do we have appropriate water capacity? Is our infrastructure reliable enough? Do we have the appropriate sewer capacity? And so forth. But the local decisions that are made by the mayor and the city council need to focus on the Leavenworth citizens. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Bless you.
So Leavenworth is a very small town. Leavenworth is a much bigger community. When I ran 4 years ago, I made sure everybody knew that when they came to speak to the Leavenworth City Council, when I'm mayor, they got a chance to speak and they didn't have to tell me where they live. If they're a part of our community, they can come and talk and tell, because what we do in Leavenworth does impact a much broader community. And I appreciate a much broader community. Legally, I only impact a square mile. It's small, but morally, spiritually, we're much bigger than that. And I acknowledge that. And again, in my dealings with people, I facetiously say my problem in running for mayor is all my friends live out of town, which I hope isn't true, but a lot of them do, but they're still a part of the Leavenworth community. So that's how I deal with that. Legally, there are legal things that I can only do within Leavenworth. I can't spend money outside of Leavenworth. I can't do, but I can acknowledge each and every one of you who live outside as a part of this community and realize that what we do does impact you, and think of the whole community as we plan. Even in regards to housing, we're not going to solve it. I can only deal with Leavenworth, but I will work with the county and others to deal with housing in places that are outside of Leavenworth, and Shaston and Dryden can be places that are still within our school district and in our community that can help with housing. We're not going to solve housing in Leavenworth. We're not big enough. I can't get the 800 jobs we've added. I'm not going to get 800 houses for those 800 jobs that we've added in our downtown in the last 10 years. But I can get a portion of them here and work with others like the county and other communities to help get more housing there as well. So my hands are sort of tied, but the way so many of our problems are much greater than one city and one community, and you have to be willing to and able to. And I have good relationships with lots of people in our county and other communities, and I love to work collaboratively.
Okay, we're gonna change it up a little bit.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
David.
I want you to ask him a question and then answer the same question yourself.
And then answer the same question? Oh, that's hard. You know what? That's a tough one. What do you like to eat on Sundays?
That's what you're going with.
Yeah, I don't, you know what?
A very nice Sunday dinner, home cooked. Could be a variety of things, but yeah, that's always an evening dinner that I always look forward to before starting the week.
I used to just crumble bread and pour milk on it and have an onion sandwich and tomato juice.
You're all welcome to come over for dinner.
All right, Rich, your turn.
Okay, so Mayor Florea, as you know, I've been very much concerned with the excessive speeding in our school zones, specifically where I live, but not just, by the way, I live on Highway 3, for the otherwise known as East Pine Street, Industrial Highway and Racetrack. But it is a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and it is a school zone. And it's not just my section of Pine Street, but it's Burke and it's Birch and it's Ski Hill. And we not only have excessive speeding going on in our school zones, but I'm sure you have all heard these altered, unmuffled vehicles that go around terrorizing our neighborhoods with the most obnoxious noise. Has everybody heard of these vehicles? Okay. And so I have written 4 letters to the mayor and city council asking for action, okay, to keep our kids safe. And one of the main reasons I'm running is public safety. And my question to Mayor Florea would be, why, it's been 4 years, it's been 4 letters that I've written, 2 of which were signed by multiple neighbors of mine. In fact, one included a petition of my entire neighborhood. And I'm just asking you why the city has not done anything to really address this concern.
It's interesting that you would bring that up, because I actually feel like this is an example of how well we respond to our citizens. You talk about 4 letters as if we did nothing. Tom Wachholder, our public Works Director, met with you more than once, came to your place, walked your street with you. We put up speed trailers to try to get that records of what that speeding did, and we didn't get the kind of speeds that you said were happening there. We did multiple times that we put it out, and your response to that was, it's because they see the trailer and so they slow down. So guess what? We've just ordered, in fact, it just came in, and we will put up a permanent speed that will tell you how fast you're going, because if that seems to work, then that's what we'll do. And so that is a response. We did everything but what you insisted on was a stop sign, and we said that couldn't happen. And we gave you the reasons why. And a middle of the block stop sign is not a way to deal with speeding. We contacted the sheriff. They still to this day are randomly doing speed checks on there. They don't see the speeding that you see, but they do respond to us. And when we request that they do special targeting times on Pine Street, they do it multiple times a week at random times. So I don't get why you say that you got crickets from us, when I take pride in saying, here's an example of we listen and try to solve a problem. But guess what? They're speeding on my street too. They're speeding on every street, and we don't have people that can sit 24/7 on any of our streets to try to get them. So we're all have to live with some level of speeding. And the good news is, folks, we haven't lost a kid yet, and we're increasing our sidewalks to get them safely to school. So if you notice up Ski Hill now, we've just completed a section. We're getting funding. We've got grant funding to do some more in the next year. So we hope to get it all the way to Pine and then into our grade schools. So we're not we're not doing nothing to try to work at safety for our kids.
Rich, Aaron, answer your own question?
Yeah, I think it's a major issue. And, you know, Mayor Florea just said, we haven't lost a kid. Well, you know what? It's only a matter of time, and one kid would be way too many. And there's really, you know, talk about working with people and being responsive. Yes, the city has put the trailers out there. Do they help to calm things down a little bit? Yeah, because people are afraid that there's going to be a photo taken of their license plate and they're going to get a ticket. Okay, but it's right outside my living room window. And again, it's not just my street. When I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people, it's Brook, it's Birch, it's Ski Hill, and others, and they're all telling me about the problem with speeding. I came up with the solution. If you're familiar, excuse me, if you're familiar with East Pine Street, just as an example, okay, on one end, you're at the Titus and Pine intersection, right, four-way stop, and then you've got this drag strip, okay, all the way to Fur, where you have those crazy turns to try and get out to the Chumpstick. Everybody with me here? Okay. And there's nothing prohibiting people from just flooring it through that, all right? It's at least a half-mile long, okay? And they're buzzing on Burke and Birch and Ski Hill and other areas as well. And right in the middle between Titus Road and First Street is Cone, which is closed off to traffic except for school buses. Okay, that's right in the midpoint of it. Okay, and so what I suggested as a simple, inexpensive public safety way to address this problem is to put up 2 stop signs and a crosswalk. There's already 2 very small signs. You need binoculars to read them. Okay, but there are 2 small signs that say slow, student crossing. There is a permanent trail that's about 5 feet wide that goes from Cedar Street up into Pine, where kids are getting to the high school and the middle school. If you put 2 stop signs and a crosswalk at that Pine and Cone intersection, your problem is solved. Because when they get to Cone Street, these motorists, that's when they hit the peak velocity, and that's where the students are crossing. And what the city told me is that it doesn't meet the warrants. And my response to that is, what's more important, warrants or public safety? And I would definitely side with public safety there. 1 kid hurt or killed would be way too many. And we need to preserve the character of our neighborhoods by preventing these motorists and obnoxious vehicles from going around and terrorizing our neighborhoods.
Okay, well, we've gotten to 7:10. That leaves us with 5 minutes for closing remarks. You had the last question, so Carl, you get to start.
Just want to say it's been a real privilege to be a mayor for the last 4 years. I didn't know what I was doing when I ran. I'd been on city council, I'd done some things. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to keep our community a whole community. That's all I knew. I was surprised that I got elected, to tell you the truth. But it's been an honor. I want to keep working. I've got a passion. I have a passion for housing only because I have a passion for community, and you can't have community if you can't house the community. That's what's behind my passion to try to get us housing for our workforce. It's about keeping us a community. My kids all went to school, all 12 grades here. I want other kids to be able to come here and go to all 12 grades here. I don't want them to only have to be wealthy kids. I want them to be working class kids that are able to be here. That's what makes a community strong and great, is its diversity of people rubbing elbows. We've got too much separation, too much siloing of our society. We don't need that in Leavenworth. And that's what I ask, that if you would honor me with another 4 years, by golly, we'll get a funding stream that we can grab some housing and keep this community from losing its workforce completely. We've lost a lot of it. We don't want to lose anymore. Thank you, and I hope that those of you in town will vote for me.
Well, I just first want to thank Wenatchee River Institute and the staff here for putting this event on, and for all of you for coming here tonight and listening to what we've had to say. I do want to say that I am running for several reasons. I've mentioned the public safety priority. I've mentioned the excessive speeding and obnoxious vehicle priority, but other things include our residential streets. We have the 4th worst streets in the entire state of Washington. And this has been a reality for our residents for a very long time and absolutely needs to be addressed. I'm also a strong advocate for a very strong business community. You know, when I became administrator here in 2005, there was a real division, and I agree. We got to get out of the divisiveness, both locally and nationally. I mean, it's crazy. Okay, but when I became administrator, there was a real divisiveness between the business community and the residential community. And I was very fortunate enough to be quite effective at bridging that gap. And I think a similar kind of effort is needed because, again, whether we like it or not, we have to understand that we rely on tourism. And with a healthy tourism economy and keeping people coming back to Leavenworth, it's keeping all of our property taxes low. Okay, so if we start losing visitors, all we're going to see is our property taxes increasing because it's the sales tax from the tourism that keeps the property taxes low. I also think that we need to really take a hard look at how we remove snow in our city. It's never an easy thing. Okay, it's always been an issue, but we've got to do it better. Hey, we have to do it better. When the plows come through after a heavy nightfall of snow, and the plows come through and put the berm 3-4 feet up at the end of people's driveways, and they're trying to get out in their cars and get to work, especially our elderly community, we have to do a better job. And I don't know exactly what the definitive solution is there. Okay, but it is something that would be a priority of mine. We've already touched on parking. We've already touched on managing thoughtful growth. And I have a real concern that we're losing some of our shine here in Leavenworth. And we cannot be the city of dimming lights. We cannot be the city of dying lights. We have to be the shining beacon for our entire region, country, and world, because we have visitors come here from all over this globe. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Please take a minute, introduce yourselves to the candidates. They're here. Happy to mingle a little. We're gonna shut the doors at 7:30, so Tucker can go to bed, but you're welcome to hang out along the outside.
Let me just say one thing, it's not the 4th worst, we have the 3rd worst streets. And we are going to work on it, but not putting lipstick on the pig. We're got to do the whole thing.